Hello, hello, Christine E. Schulze here, your favorite Elvish author, and welcome to Chapter Reactions, formerly known as A Chapter a Day. I am an author of young adult fantasy, and today we're going to be reading a selection from one of my YA fantasy books called Prelude of Fire. Now, what we do here with Chapter Reactions is we read a chapter, usually the first chapter, from different books, to see how we like them, to see how you like them. So maybe you'll find something new that you want to read. And after we read these chapters, we're going to just talk a little bit about how we enjoyed it, and if it's something that we think that we would want to read, and what questions we might have. This is my boyfriend, Isaac. He won't be with me for every video, but he's going to be with me for this one and for some future videos. So yeah, so we're just going to hop into it. So strap on your elf ears and get ready to listen to Prelude of Fire. As always, we are going to start with the blurb to see what my book is about, and then we'll get into it to read a chapter or two. The blurb says, Ashlai is a fire who can harness powers of flame from the sun. Despite her powers, or perhaps because of them, she has always felt like an outsider among the Force-footer elves who raised her and her brother, Merit. When their home is attacked by King Ragnar and his Sere, a vicious drought that burns all in its path, Ashlai embarks on a quest to save it. Her only clues are the strange music playing inside her head, the warnings of a captive princess, and a broken prism left to her by her long-lost mother. With the help of new friends, including a snarky elf, two squabbling but kind-spirited bards, and a boy who can turn into a tree, Ashlai journeys to collect the remaining prism shards. Can she find them and defeat Ragnar before his Sere consumes all Hyloria? Or will the secrets of the prism cause Ashlai to lose her new friends, her family, and even herself? Prelude of Fire is the first in an epic quartet that combines music and magic, while reminding us that our choices, not our circumstances, define who we truly are and will become. Now, you've read Prelude already, so this won't be so much a reaction for him, but after I read a chapter to you guys can say what your reaction is below and see if it's something that you'd be interested in reading. Obviously, I've read it because I wrote it, so this won't be a reaction for me specifically. But yeah, I'm going to read, and then you guys can let me know your thoughts down in the comments. So we're going to start with the prologue, which is actually a prelude. So we'll be reading the prelude to Prelude. And the prelude is called The Boy in the Tree. Ashlai Jardis awoke. The young teen sat up, blinking in the bright sunlight. The southern wood had been plagued overnight by a searing heat uncommon for early autumn, and a sticky sweat still clung to her skin, but at least the thick veil of dust and ash no longer tainted the sky. A cool breeze stirred at last, and she inhaled deeply, relishing the clear air and letting it wrap around her faintly burning lungs like a balm. At first, she could only sit gulping the cool air, dazed and unsure where she was or what had happened. But then she felt something metallic and warm at her side, her new sword. She reached for it, but no sooner did her flesh touch the hilt than a sharp pain burned her palm, and she snatched back her hand with a cry. As she turned her hand over, a shaft of sunlight illuminated the jagged triangular shape burned into her flesh. Its original brilliant blaze had been reduced now to a pale glow, and the wound had already begun to scar. Pushing through the pain, she clutched the hilt of her sword once more, but this time, along with the sting, a shrill note like a flute shrieking at an impossible decibel tore through her mind, making her wince and curse beneath her breath. Everything rushed back to her, the prism and the princess, and the golden-cloaked riders carrying the fury of lightning and fire as they soared upon their giant winged panthers, burning and killing all in their path. The note faded, and then ceased its torturous trilling altogether. Along with the memories of the awful sound had invoked, Ashlai's somber spirit returned, but she didn't cry. Her tears were long spent. She must focus on fulfilling Princess Liliana's command, to find the Sprite Woods and the person there who would help her. Ashlai caught her reflection on the sword's smooth golden surface. Her shoulder-length, fiery red hair was disheveled and streaked with ash, her purple tunic torn and charred with smoke. Wiping her hand across her brow, she wished she had a change of clothes. After everything that had just happened, cleanliness was the least of her concerns, but she would give anything to at least slip into something cooler. A thick sweat began to form on her skin, and the breeze wouldn't help for long. Behind her, the sun glared hot and high in the sky. She glanced up and then did a double take. It was already past noon. "How long have I been asleep?" she muttered, rubbing at her throat. It still ached dully from all the smoke and dust. "Since you passed out yesterday," a young man's voice answered. Startled, Ashlai staggered to her feet, grabbed her sword, and spun all about, but she could see nothing except the thick trees of the surrounding wood. She hoped the heat hadn't made her delirious. Surely the voice had sounded too near and too real to be a mere trick of the mind. "Where are you?" she demanded. A sting of anger empowered her, returning strength to her weary body. She clutched the sword hard, already feeling its innate flame merging with the fire magic filling her body. "Show yourself," she said, a little more forcefully. "I'm right behind you." Ashlai whirled, seeking the stranger in vain. "I still can't see you." The invisible whoever it was released an agitated sigh. "Of course you can see me, unless you're blind, which you obviously aren't, since you keep staring right at me." "Oh," he chuckled. "Sorry, I was up pretty late guarding you, so I guess I forgot that I'm in my other form, which might not be the best now I think of it. I'm rather susceptible to fire, and you seem sort of in a foul mood, and you are aware that you're holding a fire blade." Ashlai swung her sword, and a wide arc of golden red flame blazed from its tip. Euphoria flitted inside her as she released her pent-up anger and pain at this invisible friend or foe. As he shouted in alarm, Ashlai only half paid attention, spinning to release another ring of fire. "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" he cried. Ashlai paused, still clutching the blade, and lowered the flames, smirking at the sudden fight in his voice. Breathing hard, she stood poised, ready for another go. "Hey now," the voice said, "you nearly burned my arms to cinders." "Maybe if I could see your arms, that wouldn't be an issue." Ashlai glared warningly in the voice's direction and pointed her sword right at the trees. "Now listen up. I'm in no mood for these silly games. Show yourself, or I'll burn more than just your arm. Whoa, watch out!" Even as the invisible person shouted this warning, Ashlai spotted something from the corner of her eye, something bright and whizzing straight toward her. She flung herself to the ground just as it zoomed past her head, so close that it ruffled her hair. As it whacked into one of the nearby trees, Ashlai glanced up in alarm. An arrow emitting smoke, a sign of the flame burning on its tip only moments ago. How easily it could have speared her head had she moved just the wrong way. Something roughly grabbed Ashlai's arm, and she yelped, then stared in alarm to see a tree branch closing its small, thin limbs around her arm. The next moment, the branch morphed into a green hand and arm, and suddenly, a tall, lanky, green-skinned boy stood before her instead of a tree. Several more arrows whizzed past, narrowly missing them both. The green stranger's gaze narrowed in annoyance, and he yanked Ashlai up, dragging her into the woods on a mad dash. "Damn it," he snapped. "What were you lying around for?" Ashlai's legs wobbled, and her entire body ached as she stumbled in her attempt to match his swift pace. "Stop daydreaming and pick it up. We gotta fly out of here before they burn us both to ashes. Trust me, they're more skilled with those arrows than you are with your sword." All Ashlai could do was sheath her sword. She didn't wish to spare either of them as she fell. Despite how annoying this green stranger was, he did seem intent on saving her life. And she panted for breath as he dragged her along. His legs were long, his strides broad and high, yet effortless, almost like a deer springing across the earth. Even more astounding was the fact that he seemed to constantly adjust shades of green, to blend almost perfectly with the forest blurring past. If not for his tight grip on her hand, she would have sworn that he sometimes vanished altogether. The young man jabbered on, his voice as fluid as though he was merely taking a stroll instead of fleeing for his life. "First rule of making grand escapes, don't stand around and let people shoot arrows at your head, especially when your hair is a brighter shade of red than the fire they're throwing at you. Kinda makes you a perfect target." They emerged into a large clearing. Last I checked, leading someone into a wide open space like this," Ashlai gasped for another breath, "also makes them perfect targets. How can I be so sure you're not on their side?" The next instant, the green boy whistled. Something huge and green swooped from above, and Ashlai's scream was choked into silence as the creature snatched them up and rose abruptly higher and higher into the sky. "And the second rule," the young man said smugly, "is to always have a trusty steed at hand." When Ashlai regained enough composure to survey what was happening, she saw that they rode astride a giant bat-like creature. Its soft, thick fur was many different shades of green, matching its master's skin and hair perfectly. Ashlai imagined the bat and the boy merging together to form a two-headed creature named Bizarre and Sarcasm. As they ascended on large leathery wings, Ashlai hugged her legs tight around the beast's body and clutched its thick tufts of fur with an iron grasp, all the while staring straight ahead between its massive fox-like ears not daring to look down or even move. From the corner of her eye, she glimpsed a defiant smirk on her rescuer's lips. And just what is so amusing? The boy had turned around to face her and now glanced her up and down. Nothing. I just didn't expect... You. With a wry snort, he looked ahead once more. You didn't expect me to what? Ashlai leaned toward him, but then she swayed uneasily and quickly resumed her position, focusing her gaze on one of the bat's ears to say to herself, Here. Ashlai stared as the boy extended his arm, which suddenly turned into a branch again. Her fear of being only Amiel knew how high in the air was momentarily forgotten as he plucked some of his leaves and held them toward her. It's not poison, he said with a roll of his eyes. They have healing properties. Might help with your nerves, any queasiness. Ashlai hesitated, but then her stomach churned and she was instantly keen on having anything inside her belly. She chewed the leaves slowly, wrinkling her nose as the pungent juices bit at her tongue and throat. Despite their unpleasant sharpness, a coolness also released in her mouth, providing some comfort and settling her stomach a bit. Thanks, that does help, she admitted. Of course, the boy huffed, turning his branch into an arm once more. I mean, it's really lucky that I found you when I did, you know? That I stayed up to guard you all night? You fell asleep, Ashlai said flatly. And if you hadn't, you might have noticed danger sooner. We might have gotten out of there without being attacked at all. The young man's face drew into a defeated grimace. You're safe now, aren't you? That's all that matters. And this is nice, isn't it? He threw his arms wide, embracing the wind as it rushed over him. Ashlai watched him skeptically. The only nice thing about this experience is the constant breeze. Though, even the breeze exists only because we're moving at a terrifying speed at a terrifying height. Whatever. It's alright. First flights are scary for everyone. Besides, I'm used to this attitude. People like you are always ungrateful anyway. What is that supposed to mean? The young man shrugged and glanced at her sword before looking suddenly blasé. People born into good families. People who never have to worry about food or clothes or money or war. People who have everything they need. Is that what you think? Ashlai growled, her voice wavering. She wiped away a few sudden, angry tears. You don't even know me. You think my life is so perfect? After I watched my entire village razed to the ground just yesterday? Why did you even rescue me if only to tell me how inadequate I am? I'm obviously unworthy of your almighty services. For a moment, dead silence passed between them. Only the shrill wind whistled in Ashlai's ears, reminding her again of the high-pitched music note and making it reverberate faintly in her memory. She breathed deeply, fighting tears hard. She had already told herself no more tears, and certainly wouldn't waste them on this idiot's satisfaction. Quietly, the boy said, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize. Sometimes I just blurt things out. Yeah, well, maybe you really need to think before you open your mouth. Yeah, maybe I do. Ashlai took another deep breath. Her anger melted, ever so slightly, as she saw the sincere embarrassment on his face. Here, have some water. He reached for a flask wrapped around his waist and handed it to her. Ashlai nodded gratefully before chugging the water. The liquid rushed over her achy throat with a soothing coolness, washing some of the pain away. Thanks, Ashlai said, capping it and handing it back to him. No problem. Anyway, I guess we ought to get acquainted if we're going to be traveling together for a while. Name's Errol of the Tree Sprites. Ashlai, of the Forest Footers. It was Errol's turn to look genuinely surprised. You're really the Ashlai? The one Old Man Eldwin told me about? Ashlai wrinkled her nose. Who in all the world is Old Man Eldwin? Errol shook his head. Never mind. Long story. Just, it's a pleasure to meet you. Really. You too, Ashlai said, though she wasn't quite sure yet. At least he was making an attempt to drop his constant sarcasm. Errol studied her carefully. Aren't you a fire, though? You're definitely not a forest footer, especially with those purple eyes. Yeah, but I grew up with the elves. I've never even seen another fire besides my brother. Not until recently. She let her voice trail, uncertain how much was safe to tell him. Still watching her closely, Errol said, I probably should have already done this, but maybe this will help you feel better about everything. Errol held out his hand. A jagged, triangular scar gleamed ever so faintly on his palm. The mark looked identical to hers, only a bit older, she guessed, from the state of its healing. Wait, Ashlai said, as another memory dawned on her. You said you're from the Sprite Woods, and you've been waiting for me, right? Because some elder sent you? Errol arched her brow. And you're getting at? Liliana told me to meet someone in the Sprite Woods, someone who had a mark like mine. I guess she meant you. Errol grinned and lowered his hand. You're right. This mark, Eldwin's story, is why I came and stood guard over you. I found you, saw you had a similar mark, and figured you were the one I was looking for. Besides, it's not like we get a ton of fires in my neck of the woods." "Did you hear it too then?" Ashlai asked. "When your mark burned, did you hear it?" "That terrible shrieking like someone playing a song to wake the dead?" "Yeah, I definitely heard it, and sometimes I still do. There have been a lot of other strange things going on in the woods the past couple of days, and I was told I'm not the only one to be expecting these marks, or being sent on a wild goose chase for prism shards." "Does that mean you already have one too? A shard?" Ashlai asked. He shook his head. "I do not." "Then why would your mark have burned? And why did you hear the music note?" "I'm not sure." Errol watched her with a deep curiosity, and she watched him back. He looked about her age, maybe a couple of years older, a strange mix between gangly and muscled. Away from the forest, his skin shimmered a fair leaf green, his hair a darker shade. He wore a simple dark green tunic with brown pants, and his feet were bare. He suddenly smiled in amusement and winked at her, and she turned her attention back to the bat's ear. This was the last thing she needed right now, for a forest boy to think she was falling for him when there were far more serious matters to deal with at hand. "So, what's your story?" Errol asked. "I mean, Master Eldwin sure made it sound like you're a big deal." "I don't know why," she said. "How long have you even been looking for me? Your mark looks older than mine." Errol folded his arms, defiant as ever. "Hey, you tell your tale, I'll tell mine. That's the deal." Ashley's demeanor grew stormy as the happenings of the past few days flashed through her mind like a recurring nightmare. She pressed her lips into a thin line, remaining pointedly silent. "Hey, I'm sorry," Errol said. "If you really don't want to talk about it, it's okay." "No, it's all right," she said quietly, before hesitating again. She needed to talk, if she could find the strength. Errol watched her with sincere curiosity. If nothing else, perhaps his calm spirit about everything that had just happened meant he would be less likely to judge her or overreact if she told her story. Somehow, she found his obnoxious presence comforting. Perhaps he was just the person she needed to confide in at the moment. The way he had protected her so fervently reminded her of Merit. This thought stabbed at her heart anew, but it also reminded her of the urgency of her mission. If Errol was going to help her, he needed to know what Liliana had shared with her and everything that had happened afterward. Taking a deep breath, she began her tale. And that is the end of the Prelude to Prelude of Fire. A little bit long, but I might read a couple chapters in a subsequent video. But yeah, that's Prelude of Fire. There's a lot of questions already to answer, right? Like, what happened to Ashley's home? We know it probably got destroyed by fire. Does that maybe have to do with King Ragnar and his Sere, this crazy fire/drought magic he has going everywhere? What's the deal with them collecting these prism shards? And how is Ashlai and Errol's adventure going to progress from here? You can find that out by reading Prelude of Fire for yourself. And you've read Prelude of Fire. Before we close, do you have any remarks you'd like to make about the book without giving away any spoilers, of course?
No. Mm-hmm. I like how the relationship progresses between Ashlai and Errol, and all the action and the adventure that go on.
Okay. Yeah. Some people have compared earlier versions of this book to The Legend of Zelda. We're both big fans of that, and I appreciate that. It's a high compliment, but there is a quest involved, obviously, with collecting the prism shards, and you do also meet quite a diversity of characters and different races. So that, if you like Zelda, you might like this book. If you like quests like Lord of the Rings, you might like this book. I had one reader compare this to if Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter had a baby, which I guess is also a compliment, so if you like those types of things. Yeah, but you can find my book. This one in particular is from Words Matter Publishing, so it's on their website, it's on Amazon, it's on Barnes & Noble, it's on some other websites in both ebook and paperback form, and you can find all of my other books also on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. On that note, happy reading, may you be inspired, and I'll see you in my next video.